Deep within Tokai, Cape Town, behind the concrete walls and razor wire, lies Pollsmoor Correctional Centre, one of the most notorious maximum security facilities in Africa, dominated by the violent codes of the numbers gangs and housing some of South Africa's most dangerous offenders. Today, we are breaking down 5 of the most high-profile prisoners who have ever walked the halls of Pollsmoor Prison. Number 5. Henri van Breda. In the early morning hours of January 27, 2015, emergency dispatchers in the Western Cape received a bizarre call. On the line was 20-year-old Henri van Breda. He reported that an intruder armed with an axe had broken into his family's multi-million rand home inside the ultra-secure Zolile Winelands Golf Estate in Stellenbosch. Henri's father, Martin van Breda, his mother, Teresa, and his 21-year-old older brother, Rudy, had all been brutally murdered in their beds and the hallway. His 16-year-old sister survived, but suffered massive head trauma and memory loss. Henri himself had only minor, superficial scratches. What immediately alarmed investigators was the timing. Henri waited over 4 hours after the attack occurred before calling emergency services. As police audited the estate, they found zero evidence of a security breach. The multi-layered perimeter walls, motion sensors, and security patrols were untouched. Forensic analysis completely dismantled Henri's story. Furthermore, medical experts concluded that the minor cuts on Henri's body were clean, deliberate, and self-inflicted, staged specifically to fabricate his story of a mysterious intruder in a balaclava. In May 2018, Henri van Breda was found guilty of 3 counts of premeditated murder and sentenced to 3 life terms. Immediately after his conviction, Van Breda was taken into custody at Pollsmoor Maximum Security. Due to his high profile, his defense team voiced severe concerns over his safety in the general population, where gang initiation and violence are constant threats. Citing his epilepsy diagnosis and chronic depression, his legal team petitioned to have him housed in Pollsmoor's specialized hospital wing. For weeks, the wealthy estate inheritor was held under strict medical observation inside Pollsmoor's walls before being transferred to Drakenstein Prison to serve out his life sentence. Number 4. Xolile Mngeni. In November 2010, British newlyweds Anni Dewani and her husband Shrien arrived in South Africa for what was meant to be a dream luxury honeymoon. But on November 13th, while taking a late-night taxi tour through Zwelethu on the outskirts of Cape Town, their vehicle was ambushed by armed men. Rashied Staggie and the taxi driver were removed from the vehicle unhurt, while Annie was kept inside as the hijackers sped off into the night. Hours later, the abandoned vehicle was found. In the back seat lay the body of 28-year-old Anni Dewani, dead from a single gunshot wound to the neck. The murder made global headlines and severely threatened South Africa's international tourism reputation just months after the 2010 FIFA World Cup hosted in South Africa. What initially looked like a random, tragic carjacking quickly spiraled into a complex murder-for-hire investigation. As police arrested local operatives, a paper trail of cell phone calls, text messages, and cash payments emerged, revealing that the entire hijacking had been staged as a contract execution. At the center of the execution squad was 23-year-old Xolile Mngeni, locally known as Wawa. Ballistics, fingerprint evidence, and testimony from co-conspirators established that Mngeni was the man who held the firearm and pulled the trigger that ended Anni Dewani's life. In December 2012, Mngeni was convicted of premeditated murder, robbery with aggravating circumstances, and illegal possession of firearms, receiving a life sentence. However, Mngeni's incarceration was plagued by severe medical complications. Prior to his conviction, while awaiting trial in custody, Mngeni was diagnosed with a complex and malignant brain tumor. He underwent surgery to remove part of the tumor, but his health deteriorated rapidly. Remanded to Pollsmoor Prison, Mngeni spent his entire period of custody inside Pollsmoor's heavily guarded medical wing. As his condition worsened, leaving him bedridden and partially paralyzed, Mngeni's legal team repeatedly applied for medical parole, arguing that Pollsmoor's medical facilities were incapable of managing a terminal cancer patient in his final stages. The parole application sparked intense public debate in South Africa regarding prisoner rights versus justice for crime victims. Ultimately, the Department of Correctional Services rejected his applications, citing the extreme gravity and cold-blooded nature of the contract murder. On October 18, 2014, at the age of 27, Xolile Mngeni died while under guard in Pollsmoor's hospital ward, ending one of the darkest subplots of the Dewani honeymoon trial. Number 3. Zwelethu Mthethwa. Zwelethu Mthethwa was once a celebrated figure in the global art world. His massive photographic portraits, which documented the lives of informal settlement residents and migrant workers, were showcased in elite galleries across Paris, London, and New York, selling at auctions for tens of thousands of dollars. He lived a life of extreme luxury, driving high-end sports cars and mixing with international collectors, curators, and cultural elites. But in the early morning hours of April 14, 2013, that refined facade shattered on a dark street corner in Woodstock, Cape Town. In the dead of night, 23-year-old Nokufela Khumalo, a local sex worker, was brutally assaulted outside a row of shops. The attacker kicked and repeatedly crushed her body against the pavement before getting into a luxury black Porsche metal top and driving away. Nokufela died at the scene from massive blunt force trauma and internal injuries. When homicide detectives retrieved security footage from a nearby surveillance camera, they discovered the entire murder had been captured on high-definition video. The footage showed a man in dark clothing exiting a black Porsche and carrying out a relentless, multi-minute assault on Khumalo. Detectives traced the vehicle registration directly to Zwelethu Mthethwa. During the lengthy trial, Mthethwa pleaded not guilty, claiming he had consumed excessive alcohol that night and had zero memory of the event. His defense team brought in international art experts and character witnesses to argue that a man of his standing could not have committed such a crime, while simultaneously hiring technical consultants to question the facial recognition and lighting quality of the CCTV footage. However, forensic experts successfully matched the physical characteristics, movement patterns, and vehicle details directly to Mthethwa. In March 2017, the High Court found him guilty of murder, with the judge noting the total lack of remorse shown throughout the trial. He was sentenced to 18 years in prison. The fall from grace was absolute. Mthethwa was transported straight from the air-conditioned courtroom to Pollsmoor maximum security. Deprived of his wealth, luxury vehicles, and elite social circle, the internationally renowned artist was processed into Pollsmoor's general population cells, serving his sentence among thousands of violent offenders in one of the starkest social contrasts in South African penal history. Number 2. Rashied Staggie. To truly understand Pollsmoor Prison, one must understand the deeply entrenched gang culture of the Cape Flats, and no name in South African history carries more weight inside and outside those prison walls than Rashied Staggie. Alongside his twin brother Rashied rose from the impoverished streets of Manenberg to establish the Hard Livings, one of Cape Town's most formidable and violent street gangs. Throughout the 1980s and 1990s, the Hard Livings controlled vast empires of drug distribution, illegal firearms, extortion, and protection rackets, engaging in bloody gang wars that turned entire neighborhoods into conflict zones. The violence peaked in August 1996 during a massive rally organized by Pagad. Hundreds of vigilantes marched on the Staggie home in Salt River. In full view of national television news cameras and police officers, his brother, Rashied Staggie, was shot, set on fire with a Molotov cocktail, and executed in the street. Rather than destroying the gang, Rashied's murder made Rashied the sole, undisputed kingpin of the Hard Livings, hardening his resolve and cementing his control over the Cape Flats underworld. State authorities spent years building cases against Staggie. In 2003, his reign was finally disrupted when he was convicted of ordering the gang rape of a 17-year-old police informant who had been gathering intelligence on the gang's activities. He was sentenced to 15 years in prison, with additional years added for his role in a massive Navy armory weapons theft ring. Pollsmoor was central to Staggie's power. Inside Pollsmoor, the legendary numbers gangs, the 26s, 27s, and 28s, govern all aspects of inmate life, and high-ranking gang figures like Staggie held immense authority both inside the cells and out on the street. Staggie spent years inside Pollsmoor maximum security, serving as a constant symbol of Cape Flats gang history. In May 2013, after serving a decade behind bars, Staggie was granted day parole. However, his freedom was short-lived. Just months later, in December 2013, his parole was abruptly revoked by the Department of Correctional Services after he violated his strict release conditions by associating with known gang bosses and drug syndicates. Staggie was picked up by tactical units and returned directly to Pollsmoor. Though he eventually completed his full sentence and was released in 2014, his violent past ultimately caught up with him. On December 13, 2019, Rashied Staggie was gunned down in a hail of bullets while sitting in a car outside the very same house in Salt River where his twin brother had been killed 23 years earlier. Number 1. Najwa Petersen. In December 2006, South Africa was rocked by the murder of one of its most cherished cultural icons. Taliep Petersen, a legendary musician, composer, and theater director who co-created iconic stage productions like District 6 and Cat and the Kings, was found dead inside his home in Athlone, Cape Town. He had been tied up, severely beaten, and executed with a single gunshot wound to the back of the head. At the center of the tragedy was his wife, Najwa Petersen. In the immediate aftermath, Najwa played the role of the grief-stricken, traumatized widow. She gave emotional statements to the media and told police that armed robbers had forced their way into the house, tied her up in an upstairs room, robbed the safe, and murdered her husband before fleeing. However, homicide detectives quickly noticed major inconsistencies in her story. There was no forced entry into the heavily secured home, the supposed robbery was selective, and Najwa's demeanor during interviews raised immediate red flags. When police obtained permission to track cell phone records and financial transactions, the entire plot unraveled. Detectives discovered that Najwa had meticulously planned a contract execution. She used a middleman to contact local hitmen, promising them thousands of rands to murder her husband and make it look like a home invasion. On the night of the crime, she personally opened the doors to let the killers into the house. In 2009, following a grueling and highly publicized trial, Najwa Petersen was found guilty of murder and sentenced to 28 years in prison. The presiding judge condemned her actions, describing the plot as a cold, calculated, and merciless betrayal of her husband. Najwa was sent to Pollsmoor's female correctional facility to serve her sentence. But her presence inside Pollsmoor continues to generate intense public anger. In late 2024, the Pollsmoor Correctional Supervision and Parole Board recommended that Najwa be granted early placement on parole after serving 15 years of her sentence. The decision triggered nationwide backlash from the public, women's rights organizations, and Taliep Petersen's family. The outrage grew so severe that the Minister of Correctional Services officially suspended her parole placement and referred the decision to the Parole Review Board for full re-examination. To this day, Najwa Petersen remains one of the most high-profile and controversial figures connected to Pollsmoor Prison. Which of these 5 cases surprised you the most? Drop your thoughts in the comments below.